Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we have a new life story. Let's begin. My name is Erin. It's strange how a simple envelope can feel heavier than a box of regrets. The day it arrived, I was rinsing out Leah's lunchbox, humming to myself in our narrow kitchen as the last of the Colorado sun cast a honeyed glow over our mismatched countertops. There, among the junk mail and catalogs, lay a single envelope, pearly white with gold embossing that practically announced, "This isn't really for you." I didn't need to open it to know, but I did anyway because old habits die hard. Inside, in sweeping script, it read, "You are invited to celebrate Morgan Fisher's promotion to Vice President of Client Relations." And beneath, as if it were an afterthought, Ms. Erin Lowell and guest. Again, they'd misspelled my name, the difference of a single letter, but it may as well have been a wall. I tucked the invitation behind the cereal box so Leah wouldn't see it. She was in the living room, completely absorbed in making a paper satellite out of foil and rubber bands. I leaned on the sink, staring at the faded tile floor, feeling that old sting in my chest. My name wasn't complicated. It was just unimportant to them. That night, I tidied up after Leah's latest art explosion, collected glue sticks and paint caps, and told myself none of it mattered. I didn't have to go. No one would notice if I stayed home. But the next morning, guilt arrived early, taking its usual seat across from me at the tiny kitchen table. "Mommy, what's this?" Leah's small hand gripped the RSVP card I'd left near the toaster. Her eyes were bright with expectation, her pajamas an inch too short, and her hair a wild halo. But she was smiling as if she just won a ticket to the moon. "Are we going to Aunt Morgan's party?" She was only 6, so she didn't remember the last time I'd taken her to a family event. She didn't remember my mother's toast about how impressive it was that I could feed a child with clearance yogurt. She didn't hear the laughter or feel the shame that lingered for days. "We are," I said, brushing crumbs from her cheek, because I couldn't bear to see her disappointment if I said no. It was always like this, a tug-of-war between the part of me that wanted to disappear and the tiny hope that maybe, this time, I'd be seen for something other than a mistake. That night, after Leah drifted off amid a fort of stuffed animals, I got a message from my mother. "Please, Erin, don't make this about you. Just smile and let Morgan have her night. She worked hard for this." No greeting, no warmth, just orders as if I were an unpredictable variable in their otherwise curated narrative. I stared at my phone until my chest ached, wanting to reply, to ask if she had ever once considered why I'd stopped showing up. But I didn't write back. I deleted the message, then pulled my one decent dress from the closet, navy, plain, with a stubborn zipper that never closed quite right. I ironed it anyway, hands trembling with the effort of holding myself together in the quiet of the bathroom. Sitting on the edge of the tub, I finally let the ache rise. I wanted to belong to people who seemed determined to remind me I didn't. I cried quietly, not from sadness, but because hope, when it's too small, starts to feel like a splinter under your skin. By dawn, sunlight poured in far earlier than I wanted. I hadn't really slept. Leah danced into the kitchen in her super shoes and a tutu over her leggings. "Surprise!" she shouted, holding up a card she'd drawn herself, stick figures, a pink heart, and in bold purple letters, "To the best mommy, you're my boss." I hugged her a little longer than I needed to. "Can we bring cookies to the party?" she asked, eyes shining. "Of course," I said, though I knew exactly where those cookies would end up, lost among expensive gift baskets and imported wines. But I wasn't going to teach her that gifts only matter if people clap. We packed the cookies in a tin Leah decorated with frog stickers. I nestled it in my old tote bag alongside wipes and her favorite book for the car. As I buckled her into her booster seat, I caught my own reflection. Hair tied back, lipstick barely there, eyes still tired. I whispered to myself, "You're not here to be liked. You're here to be kind to her." But beneath that practiced smile, something else pulsed. I still wanted to be seen. We parked in a crowded Denver garage, 20 minutes early. Leah dozed in the back, chocolate smudges on her chin. I woke her gently, and we stepped into the chill evening, my arm linked with hers. The rooftop venue looked like a palace to her. Balloon arches, marble accents, live jazz. The orange sun glowed against the skyline, freezing the glass towers in firelight. "Mommy, it looks like a real castle," Leah whispered, clutching my hand. At check-in, the attendant didn't bother to look up, just handed me a program. "Follow the signs for table assignments." I searched for my name on every elegant gold place card. It wasn't there. A woman in black, carrying a clipboard, tapped me on the shoulder. "Ma'am, you're Erin? Table 15 past the catering station." No questions, no smile. Just that. We weaved through clusters of suits and cocktail dresses. Startup buzzwords floated through the air. Valuation, round 2, partnerships. Finally, we reached a small folding table labeled Overflow. It was pushed near a service hallway, behind stacked chairs and banquet carts. Miscellaneous, filed away. The other seats were half filled with unfamiliar faces. Vendors, a spouse, 2 shy interns. I introduced Leah quietly, pulled out her chair, and placed her cookie tin at the table's edge. One of the interns leaned over. "You with the event staff?" "No," I said. "I'm family." He nodded, polite but uninterested. Across the room, Morgan was surrounded by a circle of admirers. Her dress sparkled under the lights. Someone handed her a glass of champagne, and her laughter carried across the room like bells. When she saw me, she paused, then strode over with the practiced ease of someone always in control. "You made it," she said, tone polite but chilly. "Didn't expect that." I didn't answer. I had been unexpected all my life. Morgan bent toward Leah. "Still making art?" she asked, voice suddenly sugary. Leah nodded. "I made cookies." Before I could say anything more, a tall woman in an emerald suit joined us. "Morgan, introduce me to your niece." Morgan beamed, placing a hand on Leah's shoulder. "This is Leah." And then, with a shrug, "That's her mom." Not my sister, not Erin, just her mom. The woman smiled. "You work with kids too?" My mouth went dry. I just nodded. The lie was easier than explaining the family history. That was how the evening began, and it only went farther downhill from there. As we settled into our seats at the makeshift overflow table, Leah gripped her napkin in both hands, swinging her legs under the chair, oblivious to the strange tension in the air. The rest of the room glittered with laughter, crystal glassware, and practiced congratulations. To them, the event was simply another opportunity to shine. For me, it felt like being displayed in a museum as something old and out of place. The program began, a scrolling montage across a massive screen. Morgan on stage at conferences, Morgan on magazine covers, Morgan shaking hands with executives. The caption in bold gold letters read, "To the visionaries who lead." Leah clapped her hands, grinning with pride. I watched from a distance, half present, my own face left out of every picture, my name missing from every acknowledgement. Just as the crowd settled, the MC's voice boomed. "Tonight, we're here to honor a true leader, Morgan Fisher, the new Vice President of Client Relations." The applause was thunderous. I tried to match Leah's excitement, but the sound only deepened the ache inside me. When the screen lit up with a pre-recorded video from Morgan's CEO, praising her for transforming the department with innovation and grit, I nearly laughed. None of them knew that years ago I'd helped Morgan fix her first resume, or that I'd coached her through her very first interview. That history had been quietly erased, just like my presence at this party. Then Morgan herself took the stage. She moved with poise, her voice smooth and certain. She thanked her company, her mentors, her colleagues. Then, raising her champagne flute, she smiled wide and declared, "But most of all, I have to recognize my big sister." Leah beamed at me, expecting something warm and genuine. Morgan's eyes sparkled as she continued, "The strongest woman I know, a single mom, endlessly resilient, and, let's be honest, basically unwanted by anyone else." The room erupted in laughter, some startled, some delighted by the boldness. Others glanced around, unsure if it was okay to join in. I sat frozen, hands locked around my water glass, unable to process the sting of being the punchline. Leah looked up at me, her confusion and hurt written clearly across her little face. "Why are they laughing at you, Mommy?" she whispered. I couldn't speak. My jaw clenched as I stared straight ahead, determined not to give anyone the satisfaction of watching me break. Morgan breezed past the moment, moving on to more applause, but I barely heard a word. The laughter still rang in my ears as my mother's voice cut through the room from her seat up front. "She's a used book, but hey, she cleans up well," she shouted, raising her glass. This time the laughter was even louder, pure, careless, uninhibited. Leah's lip trembled, and she turned her face away, her fingers gripping my hand as if she might fall without it. I didn't let myself cry. I just sat perfectly still, watching the celebration carry on without me. No one intervened, no one offered comfort or even a disapproving glance. The people who'd once held me at Christmas and called me family now laughed as if I were nothing but a family joke. Someone tapped their glass to signal the next speaker, and the noise moved on. But for Leah and me, the damage had already been done. Leah's gift, an art project she'd spent 2 afternoons making, sat on her lap untouched. She'd glued sequins and drawn Morgan in marker, complete with a gold crown sticker, because Aunt Morgan's a queen now. Leah tugged gently on my sleeve, uncertain. "Can I give it to her now?" she whispered. I hesitated, desperate to protect her from another wound. But her hope was so bright and innocent, and I couldn't bear to dim it. "Go ahead, sweetheart," I said softly. She clutched the homemade frame in both hands and wove through the crowd, dodging servers and swirling dresses until she reached Morgan by the dessert table. I watched as Leah tapped her aunt's elbow, presenting the gift with pride. Morgan glanced at the frame, then forced a tight, hostess smile. "Oh, you're sweet, but I really don't have a place for handmade things in my apartment. Maybe your mom can keep it for you." A woman beside her snorted behind a glass of wine. Morgan gave Leah's shoulder a quick pat and turned back to her friends. Leah stood frozen, clutching the frame. She returned to me, her face crumpling, lips pressed tight as she tried not to cry. I gathered her into my lap, brushing her hair back. "Did I do something wrong?" she whispered. "No, baby. You're the only one here who did something right." The MC's voice screeched back through the speakers. "Let's move on to real gifts now, folks. Don't worry, there won't be any more glitter glue tributes." The laughter, this time, was directed at Leah. She looked down at her uneaten cookie, sitting on a napkin as rejected as her gift. My rage was cold and quiet. They weren't just humiliating me. They were teaching Leah that kindness was embarrassing, that small gestures were something to mock. I looked around the room. Morgan was laughing with her crowd, my mother was scrolling her phone, and the rest carried on as if nothing had happened. No one met my eye, no one spoke up. I leaned close to Leah and whispered that we'd be leaving soon. She nodded, hugging the little frame to her chest. I sat silently, studying every face in that room, memorizing the ones who laughed, the ones who looked away, the ones who would claim later that they hadn't noticed. I had always thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet, but I realized, sitting there beside my daughter, that real peace can't exist where humiliation lives. They were about to learn what happens when you laugh at the wrong person.
Somewhere between Morgan's third toast and the fourth round of shrimp tartlets, Leah needed a napkin. She'd gotten strawberry filling on her fingers and was too shy to lick them clean in public. As I bent to grab a stack from the buffet, I heard a sharp rip. The zipper on my dress, the one I'd patched by hand last winter, had finally given way. The seam split right under my arm, exposing a jagged line of skin. Instinctively, I pressed my elbow tight against my side, hoping no one had noticed. But of course, someone always does. A few faces flicked my way, their curiosity veiled behind carefully polite expressions. No one offered help or even a sympathetic glance. If anything, I felt a shift, a kind of mean-spirited interest, the way people slow down at the scene of a minor accident, eager to glimpse something ugly. Leah noticed. She quietly slipped off her pink cardigan and wrapped it around my waist, tying a shaky knot at the small of my back. "No one will see, Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You still look pretty." That almost broke me. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a slow, dissolving sort of way. A heartbreak that radiated behind my eyes and into my bones. I turned away, wiping my face with the inside of my arm so Leah wouldn't see me cry. Then I pulled myself together, guiding her back to the overflow table, my steps cautious, my every movement reminding me I was out of place in every sense. On the big screen, the photo montage looped again. Images of Morgan on business trips, Morgan at city galas, Morgan in front of a whiteboard, teaching a team. But one photo stopped me cold. A shot of Morgan at our parents' old house 10 years ago, rehearsing her very first pitch deck. I remembered the original. I had been standing right beside her, in sweatpants, holding a mug of tea and a red marker, coaching her through her opening slide. But in this version, I'd been cropped out, carefully erased, as if I'd never been there at all. My throat closed, not out of surprise, but out of a grim recognition. It wasn't enough for them to quiet me. They wanted me gone, invisible, uncredited even in their own memories. I sat back down, hands trembling, and watched Leah pull out a crayon from her little purse to color quietly on a napkin. She looked up at me, her eyes solemn. "I can tell you don't feel happy here, Mommy. We can go if you want." I opened my mouth, desperate to say yes, to gather our things and vanish. Let them celebrate their cruelty and peace. But when I looked at Leah, really looked at her, I realized she was learning something tonight. If we left now, if I allowed her to see me shrink and slip away, what would she take from it? That kindness meant disappearing? That being ignored meant you should become invisible? I'd already modeled too much of that for her. So I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because Leah needed to see that sometimes staying put is the first step to saying no. Morgan's laughter rang out again from across the room. My mother sat with a new friend, deep in conversation, nodding at every word. Leah laid her head on my arm. I breathed out slowly and reached for my phone, a text thread I hadn't used in years. I typed a few words, direct and simple, and pressed send. I didn't know what would come of it, but for the first time that night, I felt a spark of control, a sense that I could choose what happened next. A server offered me a glass of champagne. "Not tonight," I said, my voice steady. "I need a clear head." He nodded, moving on. Around me, the clink of glasses and chatter continued, but I'd stopped listening. Across the room, a man named Andrew Delaney, someone Morgan used to work for years ago, stood alone, his posture rigid, his gaze flicking from the crowd to me and back again. When Morgan stepped down from the stage, Andrew approached her. Their conversation was brief and tense. I saw Morgan's shoulders stiffen, her smile falter. Andrew didn't flatter or fawn. He simply looked at her, unimpressed. Leah tugged my hand, asking if we could get some air. We slipped out onto the balcony, the Denver skyline stretching beneath us in a web of soft lights. Why does Aunt Morgan get a party for her job, but you never did? The question stung. Because I used to think doing good work was enough, I said quietly. Leah considered this, then asked, "Is it?" I had no answer that didn't betray my own disappointment.
10 years ago, I told Morgan about Andrew Delaney's hiring round. She'd just been laid off and was desperate for a new start. I'd slipped her name into a conversation, edited her resume, and helped her prep all night for the interview. She landed the job. I got a generic thank you card. After that, Morgan stopped mentioning me at all. Now here she was, celebrated, surrounded by well-wishers, while I wore a borrowed sense of dignity and a dress held together by a 6-year-old's cardigan. Back inside, I took out my phone again, this time messaging Dr. Barlow, my mentor from graduate school. She'd gone on to lead a major foundation in the city, and I'd heard she'd be at the upcoming Denver Civic Gala, where Andrew Delaney was set to speak. "Hi, Dr. Barlow. If you're attending the Civic Gala, I'd love to reconnect and reintroduce myself properly. Aaron." I hit send, feeling my heart quicken, not from nerves, but from a rare sense of purpose. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for permission. Leah noticed the shift, even if she didn't understand it. When we returned to the room, Andrew's gaze found me again. He gave a subtle nod, not a smile, but a gesture of respect. Then he turned back to Morgan, leaning in to say something I couldn't hear. She glanced toward the stage, her composure cracking for just a second. "Why don't we open up the floor?" Andrew said, his voice carrying across the crowd. Guests shifted in their seats, uncertain, but the atmosphere changed, a ripple of anticipation in the air. Andrew didn't need a microphone or theatrics. He simply stood, and the room grew quiet, instinctively following his lead. "I'd like to say a few words," he began. "We celebrate achievement, but I want to talk about recognition." He looked not at the executives or the interns, but directly at me. There are people in this room who have done more behind the scenes than some will ever do on stage. Too often, their contributions go unmentioned. The room shifted. Some heads turned. My mother fell silent. Morgan's posture grew rigid. Tonight we honor one sister, but let's not forget who opened the door in the first place. He didn't say my name, but the message landed all the same. My hands tightened in my lap, and Leah's grip on my arm grew fierce. For once, I didn't mind. A soft voice spoke up from the back. "I'd like to say something too." Everyone turned. It was Sophie, a junior at Morgan's company. She moved forward, hands shaking. "I know this is Morgan's night, but I want to thank someone else. Ms. Lowell helped me when I was going through a rough time. She reached out, checked on me, sent resources when no one else did. I never got to say thank you, but you really made a difference in my life." Morgan tried to interrupt, but Sophie didn't stop. "I just want to say thank you, Ms. Lowell. You didn't know it, but you saved me." For the first time all night, the applause was genuine, real, and warm, not forced. It wasn't for Morgan. It was for me. I didn't stand. I didn't bow. I just sat there, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, as the room finally tilted back to balance. Andrew took the floor once more, his voice softer. "Some of us work quietly, but their impact is deeper and lasts longer than any round of applause." He stepped down, passing my table. As he went by, he leaned close, whispering, "I have something for you, but not here." I nodded, not daring to speak. Morgan's smile was gone, replaced with calculation, her eyes scanning for control she'd lost. Leah squeezed my hand. "See, Mommy? You didn't need a big party to be seen." I didn't answer. I just brushed her hair behind her ear and let the moment settle, the ground beneath us a little steadier, and the room no longer so cold. As dessert trays began to wind between the tables and the lights dimmed for the next round of speeches, Andrew approached my table and simply said,
Would you walk with me a moment?" Leah looked up at me for reassurance. I squeezed her hand, promising I'd be right back, and followed him through a corridor lined with old photos of past events. The noise of the party faded behind us, replaced by the quiet thump of my own heart. For a second, I just felt relief to be away from the forced celebration, the scent of champagne and artificial niceties lingering in the air behind me. Halfway down the hallway, the echo of heels on polished stones signaled that someone was following. Of course, it was Morgan, unable to relinquish even a moment of control over the narrative. She cut between us, her words sharp. "What exactly are you trying to do here, Andrew? You've made your point. No need to embarrass her further." Andrew didn't rise to the bait. His voice remained calm, measured. "I'm simply giving credit where it's long overdue, Morgan." She scoffed, crossing her arms tightly. "You always act like she's some misunderstood genius. She couldn't make it out there, so she clings to the idea of being nice." I met her gaze with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. "No, Morgan. I just stopped pretending that silence was the same as dignity. You chose the spotlight. I chose to do good quietly." That landed harder than any comeback because, for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was finished. Andrew motioned to a bench nearby. "This won't take long," he said gently. He handed me a slim navy box. "Your daughter left this on the main table. I thought you'd want it back." Inside, Leah's handmade frame lay slightly bent, her drawing of Morgan still shining with glitter glue and stickers. But behind it was something I hadn't expected. A folded letter on heavyweight paper bearing the crest of a well-known nonprofit. I unfolded it slowly, hands shaking. It was an official offer. Andrew sat on the board, and they wanted me to lead a new mentorship initiative focused on building resilience in overlooked communities. "We need people who know how to endure, Aaron. But more importantly, we need people who know how to rebuild," he said. I clutched the frame to my chest, not caring any more about the bent corners or glitter stuck to my fingers. It didn't matter that the role was prestigious or that my name would finally be printed in a program. What mattered was that the gift Leah had made, the one Morgan dismissed, had carried something much bigger than pride or recognition. I looked up at Andrew and nodded my gratitude. "Don't thank me. Just take what you've already earned," he replied. We walked back toward the ballroom. Inside, the slideshow had started again, but something was different. Someone, Andrew, or maybe another silent witness, had swapped out one of the centerpiece photos. Now, the screen showed the old garage from 10 years before. Morgan in mid-pitch, me beside her in sweatpants, red marker in hand. For the first time, the truth was public. Under the photo, a new caption read, "The Real Beginning." Guests turned in their seats, glancing between the screen and our table. Conversation faltered. My mother looked as if the air had left the room. Morgan stood motionless, her mouth half open, lost for words with nowhere to direct the spotlight. I made my way back to Leah, who had hopped down from her chair, clutching her frame. "Are you ready?" I asked softly. She nodded and slipped her small hand into mine. I turned to the nearest staff member and thanked them for their work. Then I glanced toward my mother, who looked frozen in place. "You don't have to say anything," I told her quietly. "I stopped listening a long time ago." I didn't wait for a response. Morgan stood rigid as I walked past, arms crossed over her chest as if trying to hold herself together. I met her eyes for the first time that evening, not with bitterness, but with certainty. "You'll always have the room, Morgan, but I have what matters." Andrew nodded to me from the bar, a small smile on his lips. Leah tugged her frame closer, whispering, "Next time, I want to make 2 of these." I smiled at her, real and deep from somewhere inside that had been locked for too long. There won't need to be a next time, baby. This was the last lesson. As the doors closed behind us, the venue's lights faded into the night. The Denver streets were empty, pools of lamplight flickering across the windshield as I drove. Leah drifted to sleep in the back seat, her head tilted gently, arms wrapped around her handmade gift. I watched her through the mirror, the dashboard's soft glow lighting her peaceful face. She was safe. She was enough. And for the first time in my life, so was I. No one followed us out. No apologies were offered, no pleas for forgiveness or half-hearted regrets. The silence wasn't an erasure anymore. It was a release. For so long, I'd believed closure had to come with someone else's regret, some grand apology. That night, I realized it never would. I had spent years waiting for their sorry as if it were air. But as I drove Leah home, I finally understood I was breathing just fine without it. By the time we reached our modest apartment on the edge of Denver, the moon had climbed halfway across the sky. I parked in the quiet lot, engine ticking softly in the dark, and just watched Leah sleep in the back seat. Her small arms still wrapped around the bent frame, she looked utterly peaceful, untouched by the bitterness that still hummed beneath my skin. I didn't rush to wake her. For a while, I just listened to the quiet, letting the last of the night's tension slide off my shoulders, feeling a strange lightness settle in its place. It was as if walking out, finally, truly walking out, had loosened some invisible chain around my chest. When I finally carried Leah inside, she barely stirred. I set her gently on her bed, tucking the frame beside her on the pillow. In the living room, I placed the letter from Andrew on the bookshelf, not behind the books, hidden as I might have done before, but right in the center, next to Leah's most recent drawings and the old, chipped vase that was all I'd saved from my childhood home. That letter wasn't just an opportunity. It was proof, tangible evidence that all those invisible hours, all the resilience I'd built in silence, actually mattered somewhere. My phone buzzed as I was making tea. It was Sophie, the junior colleague who'd spoken up at the party. Her message simple: "I hope you know you started something tonight." No punctuation, just the truth. I replied with a heart, then took the letter from Andrew and circled the start date with blue pen, drawing a small star beside it before tucking it into the kitchen drawer above the bills. Sometime after midnight, I drifted off on the couch. At some point, Leah padded out of her room and curled against me, her soft breathing settling against my collarbone, as steady and sure as the sunrise. I woke to the gentle spill of daylight across the kitchen. There was nothing dramatic about it, nothing grand, just a new day, softer than the one before. Leah wandered in, hair wild, pajamas askew. "Are we going back to Aunt Morgan's today?" she asked, still half asleep. I knelt in front of her, brushing a stray curl off her forehead. "No, sweetheart," I said, smiling. "Next time, we're going somewhere better, like the aquarium, or maybe even Disneyland." She laughed, a real laugh, her whole body lighting up. "Something even better," I promised, "a place where we don't have to shrink." She nodded, satisfied, and we ate breakfast together in the gentle quiet. No applause, no photo slideshows, no trays of pastries or carefully arranged bouquets. Just us. Ordinary, unremarkable, finally at ease. After breakfast, I walked Leah to school. She waved to the same teacher 3 times, and I waved too, feeling a new steadiness in my step. Instead of heading home, I stopped at a cafe I used to hide in when I felt loneliest. But this morning, I sat by the window instead of the back. I opened my laptop, ordered black coffee, and began drafting the proposal for the nonprofit's new mentorship program. In the subject line, I wrote, "Blueprints for Resilience, When Quiet Voices Lead." For a moment, I paused and looked out at the city, the light traffic, the students on their way to classes, the barista singing softly to himself behind the counter. And in that stillness, I heard my own voice, quiet but steady, finally unmuffled by shame or longing. For years, my family had painted me as the burden, the invisible one, the soft one whose best skill was making herself small. But the truth was, they only ever saw what made them comfortable. They never saw what made me real. And now, they didn't get to look away anymore. I closed my laptop, stood, and walked toward the door. Not a boardroom, not a party, but the real meeting, my own life, finally on my own terms. As sunlight touched my face, I remembered Leah's words, "You didn't need a big party to be seen." And for the first time, I believed it. Sometimes the people who should see your worth are the last to recognize it. By the time they do, you've already moved on. You don't need applause to prove you mattered. You don't need a microphone to reclaim your story. Sometimes just walking out is enough. If this story spoke to you, or if you've ever been the one they tried to shrink, only to rise anyway, remember, you're not alone, and you're not invisible.